everyone. If we could have your attention, please. Thank you. We love an energetic audience. However, we want to kick off tonight's debate. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for the 25th Ward Aldermanic Runoff Debate. It is my pleasure to introduce this evening's moderator, Lourdes Duarte. Lourdes anchors WGN's 4 p.m. newscast and is one of the station's lead investigative reporter. She also hosts Adelante Chicago, which highlights the city's growing Latino community. Lourdes is a 4-time Emmy Award winner, and we're very grateful that she is our moderator and supporting tonight's forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. How are you guys? Great. We have a very, very nice crowd today, and I'm happy to be a part of this. This is so important in this community and so many others throughout Chicago. And as we were backstage, I was reminded that tomorrow we would be celebrating the birth of Benito Juarez, which would have been March 21st, yeah. 1806, March 21st, 1806, someone who stood for reform. And so I think it's very fitting that today all of you are here because the 25th Ward is going to be undergoing some changes here in the coming months. So with that, let's begin. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, things that you should know about. I was told no heckling, so I'm not allowed to heckle anybody, and neither are you. So keep that in mind. You were given these red and green cards. Who has them? Red, green cards. You know what that means, right? Red, you don't like what they said. You raise that up so that they know. Green is go, means you stand behind them and the work that they're doing. There's also going to be index cards that have been given out. And I am told at about 7:45, if you have questions that you want to make sure are asked tonight, make sure you turn those in. There will be ushers going around collecting them, and they will kind of vet them and go through them, and hopefully we can get a few of those in tonight. And then finally, I want to remind you exactly how this will work. We're going to have 7 main questions, and so we'll touch on everything from the economy to TIF funding to education. I'm going to try to get through as many of these questions as possible. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then the opposing candidate will have a 1-minute rebuttal. I am told they are very strict with time, and that if they don't abide by the time, that I have to kind of jump up and down and get their attention and make sure that they do so, they stick to it. So that's how it'll work. At the end, we'll have those 3 questions from the audience and then 2 magnificent questions from students here at Benito Juarez High School, right? So I'm really looking forward to that. Okay, everybody ready? Okay? Everybody ready? Okay, let's do this. I am told, Alex, that you won the coin flip earlier today, which means you get the first question. So here it is. At the last forum, you stated that in order to provide more funding for the ward or for this community, including for schools, green space, parks, businesses, and infrastructure improvement, you would be using TIF dollars. Unfortunately, as we all know, TIF dollars are very limited, and the 25th Ward would have to compete with the 49 other wards in the city. So explain what you would do to bring additional funding here to the 25th Ward.
Yes, I think it's important to understand where we're going to get money to help fund our public schools, to help fund our teachers. TIF surplus, we have to remind ourselves that TIFs are going to end in the next couple years. So as your alderman, we have to find other creative solutions to provide funding. You know, we have a Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. As a 25th Ward, we generate millions of dollars with this fund. But what I want to do is do a full audit on Neighborhood Opportunities Fund to see how we can use some of that money to generate it, to provide it for our schools and our teachers, to provide them the resources that our teachers need, to fully fund our schools, give the teachers the resources that they need to make our schools more attractive. I think these are things that we're not doing today that we should be doing.
Okay, thank you so much. You have the option to do a rebuttal for 1 minute. If you choose to do so, you don't have to. It's up to you.
Absolutely. So the critical problem with bringing more resources to the 25th Ward lies on what the same challenges that we see with Alderman Solis. During 23 years, he took massive amount of money from developers. So that's a key problem here. So one of the key things, and I think it's very important to mention, is that in order for us to bring resources to the 25th Ward, we cannot accept a penny from developers. And I think that has to be unequivocal.
Okay.
Is our rebuttal.
Okay. The same question would go to you, and I know you just did the rebuttal, but if you wanted to expand on that, again, how would you bring dollars to the 25th Ward, and how would you compete to get some of that TIF funding to this area when you are having to compete with 49 other wards in this city?
And that's a great question. The 78 is a project, for instance, that has requested $700 million in TIF money. We cannot be subsidizing luxury development at the same time that our schools are testing positive on lead, that our schools have big infrastructure needs, or small businesses and nonprofits are crumbling. So we need to declare a TIF surplus to make sure that our basic infrastructure is being taken care of, and we need to hold developers accountable, and those who are not paying their fair share, they have to pay their fair share. We have to renegotiate those bad deals that the city has made. They have privatized parking lot, they continue to privatize the schools, and they continue to take from the poor to give to the rich. We need to tax adequately. And that is a thing that we need to vote on City Council to make sure that the resources reach our community, to make sure that developers pay their fair share, that TIF dollars are not collected anymore to subsidize development, but to fund our project needs that right now are crumbling.
Okay. You got a 1-minute rebuttal, Alex.
I think Mr. Sigcho doesn't really understand what TIF surpluses are meant for. I think we have to educate our community to let them know why TIFs were created in the first place. And we have to get more creative with our solutions. We just can't say, let's use TIF dollars for our schools. As your alderman, we have to think outside the box. Think of creative solutions to make sure we fight for priority education. Let's make sure that, we have the Pilsen Education Task Force. They've been doing an awesome job by making our schools more attractive, specializing the schools. As your alderman, I want to make sure that we bring back creative solutions to provide better funding so that we can continue to work with Pilsen Task Force Education to make our schools more attractive.
You can go ahead. I'll give you 1 more minute to rebut that.
Absolutely. I think it's important. I'd like to have a conversation because I know how the counter is going to be. Of course, I understand TIF dollars. I understand how ordinance work. There's an ordinance, Mr. Acevedo, sponsored by Sue Garza and Mr. Cardenas, that does precisely this. It declares a TIF surplus to make sure that we protect. You're supposed to be an advocate for the environment, correct? So how is it possible that we still have schools that tested positive on lead in this day and age? There's a fundamental problem in our schools. We need to make sure that we solve that we address that. And there's an ordinance that does precisely that. So I'm well aware because I've been working in coalitions to make that happen.
I think it's only fair that you get a minute as well. And then from here, we'll wrap up and go to the next question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you have to understand what the TIFs, in the next couple of years, we're going to end TIFs, right? So where are you going to get the money from, Byron? That's something you have to understand, that the community, you got to stop thinking about just giving tips. You have to understand why TIFs were created for in the first place. You have to understand why TIFs were created in the first place, and we have to get creative about solutions, about funding our public education.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, and it is related to economic development. And we've sort of touched a little bit on this, how you bring in additional funding to the 25th Ward, to this community. How would you do that? And I want you to give me specifics on how do you maintain sort of the business that is in this community and make sure that they're thriving and that they're doing well, while also encouraging new business to come to this area. Alex, as always, I will begin with you since you won the coin flip. 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I thought he was going first because I was...
Okay. I can let him go first if you'd
No,
like.
I thought we were
I can go
alternating.
first.
That's why I was saying.
We'll have Byron go first since you went first the last time. You've talked about bringing additional funding to the 25th Ward. I know that TIF funding is one way to do that. And so the question becomes, how do you maintain the businesses that are in this area to make sure that they're thriving and they're getting the resources and additional support that they need, while also encouraging other business and other economic development to come to this community?
And that's a great question. And let me give you two. I'm glad that you mentioned that we need to be very specific, because we need to show what we have done in order to show what is possible. I'll give you two examples. When a special service tax was proposed in 2013, it was clear to us that those taxes that were already strangling a lot of the small businesses, at the same time as parking is being privatized, was going to hurt our small business community. As a result, we organize, we make sure that we oppose special service taxes, and to show that we should not be taxing more to people who are generating employment, who are creating opportunity. So that tax was defeated. Even though today small businesses have a struggle, it could have been a lot worse. The other thing so we cannot keep taxing our small businesses. The next step is see how it's possible, and that's where we cannot take money from developers. When we sit down and we talk about community-driven zoning, there's a project here, it's called Mural Park on 19th and Sangamon. It is great that many organizations and nonprofit have pushed to curb development, to make it inclusive. As a result of that, now we have created at least 2 businesses, local businesses, small businesses, like the Five Rabbits, like Back of the Yards Coffee Shop. Those are 70 jobs that now are going to come with local hiring. And I look forward to keep working with the nonprofits with a mission to make sure that we continue to hold developers accountable. We can have balanced development. We can have development that is inclusive of the community and creates more spaces for small businesses, that we can generate local employment. But in order to do all that, we cannot accept money from developers, because then we will not be able to hold them accountable. Community-driven zoning process only happens when we hold them accountable.
Mr. Acevedo?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that Byron's solutions to everything is not taking money from developers. The question was, how are you going to protect small businesses? I remember growing up in Pilsen, we used to have hundreds of corner stores, mom and pop shops, where I used to buy my quarter chips. Mrs. Corral's family, she's sitting here, with Guzman, where my family couldn't afford meals, so we used to get credit from her store. Those are the mom and pop shops that we need to bring back to this community, and that's what I'm going to protect.
And the reason why it's so important, I keep bringing it back again, is because those small businesses, and some of them that Mr. Acevedo has mentioned, have closed down. And we got to be realistic about that. Our small business communities are struggling. Today, Mr. Acevedo had an exchange with a small business that were saying, look, where big businesses keep getting bigger and bigger, or small businesses keep struggling. So it is fundamental, Mr. Acevedo, and you have to understand that. And the reason why you are so defensive about this topic is because you take at least 16 donations from the same developers that fund Alderman Solis. 16.
Do you want to address that, Mr. Acevedo?
Yes. Our campaign is a coalition of multi-contributions from minority-owned business, from small businesses, from entrepreneurs from this community. We don't have PACs of giving $50,000. We don't have wives giving $90,000 to our campaigns. I don't have that kind of money.
Okay. I'm going to expand a little bit on this question because I see that people are very interested in it. So I'm going to let you give the rebuttal to what he just said.
Absolutely. I think it's disingenuous to say that we're going to advocate for small businesses, but still take money from developers and PACs. Mr. Acevedo, you have received money from PACs, and you have received money from developers, even though you have publicly said that you are not going to. You have received money from the Mexican PAC, and you have also, which is a PAC that also is funded by corporations, and you also have received money from a charter school network that is defunding of public schools. So let's be clear, you have received money from PACs and developers.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's the important thing is Mr. Byron here, I told you that, we're a campaign that's for good governance, and our contributions are a coalition of multi-people, from small businesses to resources, from education industries. So I think that's what we have to understand is let's stick to the basics. Let's look at the issues. That's why people came here.
All right, we're going to end it there because we can go back and forth all night. So we're going to end it there. Let's move on to affordable housing and what your specific plan would be to create more affordable housing in the 25th Ward. So what are you looking at? And I want you to give me specific plans that you might be thinking about or that you're developing right now.
Yeah.
So Alex, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we have to look at the Pilsen quality of life and to understand that only 27% of people who live here own. The other 70% of people who own property here are from outside this community. So how do we help change that, right? Because half of the renters, half the homeowners are using 30% of their income to pay for their housing. That's a lot of money. So we have to provide solutions to make sure that we build more affordable housing, more home ownership for working class families. Because we seem to have lost the middle gray area of working class families, right? To buy a home here in Pilsen now, you have to have $300,000 sitting in your bank account. I know we don't have that type of money. So we have to get creative. I want to work with organizations like Pilsen Neighbors and Resurrection Project, who already have doing the work in this community. They created a pool of preservations of solutions to provide more affordable housing units. Let's hold our current governor accountable when he says, let's bring $1 billion on a capital bill to provide 10,000 new units to the state of Illinois. Let's even, I have relationships with Cook County commissioners. Let's talk about increasing the surcharge of $10 for a real estate record fee to $15. We can generate millions of dollars to help fund our organizations that are doing the work. And then even further, let's talk about co-ops, PICO and other organizations that are doing an awesome job here in Pilsen. And I know another candidate, Mr. Dominguez, who talked about co-ops. I want to pick his brain and see how we can work together so that we have more renters who are building equity over time. These are solutions that I want to bring.
So one of the things that we forgot to mention in that response is how broken our property tax assessment system has been for a long time. And that's the problem with insider politicians that tend to avoid the critical problems. The issue of property taxes is key. That's why I have developed a very good relationship with the new assessor, Fritz, to make sure that we create plans that are realistic and feasible. And yes, it touched hard on those developers who are today continue to come into our community without accountability. Our broken tax system right now subsidizes the big development in our community, and that cannot continue. So we need to create exceptions for those long-term residents, especially low-income residents. And for that, we need to make sure that those developers and corporations that are paying or were paying the assessor do not continue to operate it that way. That's what we need to stop inciting deals. That's what we need imminently to make sure that we can continue to create, like you mentioned, PICO.
Okay. You're up. I am going to ask you a follow-up question to that, so I'm going to press you a little bit more on that because I asked for a specific plan to bring affordable housing to the 25th Ward. So, and it could be anything. Maybe something that you're thinking about. It doesn't necessarily have to be a complete plan, but maybe something that you think would work here.
Absolutely. I think it is very. Again, these are systemic issues, right? So we got to make sure that we talk about the big picture. We're not talking in platitudes. The specific, PICO. Let's talk, Mr. Acevedo, about PICO. I was directly involved in that initiative as well. As a director of one nonprofit, we submitted a recommendation and we have helped outreach to that initiative so more families can continue to apply, that more continue to have affordable housing. So I've been directly involved on the main initiatives. I'm glad Mr. Acevedo recognizes that. I'm glad that you are supporting that, but I haven't seen you in any of the meetings, funny enough. So we gotta make sure that we talk about the concrete examples, and we have to make sure that we take credit where credit is due. So our cooperatives and tax assessment system reform are critical components, as well as holding developers accountable. The 30% affordable housing in big development is only possible.
Okay, they cut your mic. You get a minute rebuttal.
Tess, yeah.
There you go.
I think we also have to do enough to make sure that we're helping the organizations that are doing the work here, Byron. We can't discredit them. They've been doing the tremendous work. I think one of the major issues that a lot of families have today are they're being predatory from real estate corporations who are calling their parents, who are calling themselves, asking them to buy their property. I want to work with resurrection projects, so we provide safety, we provide resources so that your grandma or my aunt or our family members can fix upstairs and downstairs, and they can rent it out to their friends and neighbors. That's how we generate and we build equity. We want our families to be able to become homeowners so that we can build equity over time and that we can preserve the culture here. I think these are solutions that, that we haven't talked about, that I think the Resurrection Project is already doing, that I want to continue to help support.
Let's talk about the $15 minimum wage increase. There is support for it, but the state is not reimbursing at a rate that keeps many of the organizations, that keeps up with that mandate, I should say. How will you approach popular initiatives if they are unfunded mandates?
Absolutely. And again, that's the problem with a lot of inside politicians that oftentimes pass bills, but yet do not understand how to implement them. Today, we have great organizations like El Valor, like Alivio, that obviously want to pay their workers fairly, that compensated at the $15 million wage. The issue is that the state is not contributing back at that level. So we need to make sure that when we implement, and the policies that we implement follow through with those promises. That is the problem with our broken system of politics, that we just say things when they're popular, but when they're implemented, we don't see the consequences. Our families right now, or community organizations, need the support. So we need to be working hand in hand with the state representatives, with the legislators in Springfield, to make sure that they're also going all the way through, to make sure that our workers are compensated fairly and the state is paying their fair share. So we need to make sure that we deliver on our promises. And that's the problem with inside politicians that only talk a good game but don't deliver.
Same question to you, unless you have a rebuttal, but it's the same question. How do you approach popular initiatives if they are unfunded mandates when it comes to that $15 minimum wage?
Yeah, as a local elected official, we have to uphold our promise to our families, to our small businesses. So we have to hold our state legislators accountable. But sometimes they can't even pass budgets. Previously, we haven't seen a capital bill in the past 4 years, and that's hurting a lot of nonprofits. That's hurting a lot of small businesses. I remember when some of our organizations here couldn't get a paycheck. People weren't getting paychecks because the state was the U.S. was shut down, the state was shut down. So as an alderman, I want to look at different other sources of revenue. I talked about the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. We generate millions of dollars. That's an area we can tap into some money to help pay for some of these programs that are not being funded by the state.
Okay, we're moving on then. The 25th Ward is heavily targeted by parking restrictions and parking enforcement penalties at a disproportionate level when compared to other parts of the city. Our constituents are unfairly burdened by expensive tickets and fees that impose financial hardship. Mr. Acevedo, the question goes to you first. How will you address this issue?
Yeah, I think it's an important issue to understand because when you knock on doors today, many people are getting hit with with tickets, and they're looking either to pay a ticket fine or looking at a grocery list, and they have to choose which one they're going to pay for because nowadays, if you get 2 tickets, you get the boot. So once elected to city council, I'm going to make a pledge to ban the boot because these are things that are hurting our families. We have to make sure that these ticket companies are becoming predatory. Since the past couple weeks, we have an office on 17th and Ashland, and we've noticed these meter readers are nonstop down 18th Street. These are families who are paying visit to the UIC Public Health, and they're getting ticketed. They're taking their grandparents, they're taking their moms, they're taking their sons and daughters to get a quick checkup, and they're being ticketed. We have to make sure that we hold these ticket companies accountable by not being predatory and banning the boot.
Same question to you. You get 2 minutes, or you can choose to do a rebuttal for a minute. You want your 2 minutes?
I would like to take the 2 minutes. I think it's important to understand how accountability works. We see the reason why we have a privatized parking meter is because of the family dynasties that have governed us for decades. The reason why we have these dynasties who have imposed those deals on us on the parking meter and hurting not only the residents, the small businesses as well, is because they don't understand the consequences of that. It is important that we make sure that lobbying, the amount of lobbying that went to not only put the parking meters, red light cameras, booths, there's a lot of things that the city had privatized. So it is important that we make sure that when we set accountability, right, we make sure that we do not take money from those same corporations. That is critical. How are we going to talk about accountability? How are we going to talk about accountability? Because that's at the core of this. Accountability and transparency are not buzzwords. These are fundamental steps to move forward. You know, I know that, and I've seen that the audience get riled up. But I think that when we have to be honest about lobbying is a big problem in the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago for these same companies. And I think that we should, you know, for the clarity of the audience who really deserve answers, Mr. Acevedo and I should disclose our tax returns so that we can make sure that there has not been, so that we do not have lobbyists, that we don't have lobbyists that are pretending to hold people accountable.
Okay. Let's expand a little bit more on this question, and I'll almost do it like a 1-minute rebuttal lightning round, I guess, if you want to call it that. Would you support lowering the cost of these expensive tickets and maybe easing some of the parking restrictions that they're seeing here in this ward? Is that something that you will fight for?
I mean, but that's like common sense. I mean, how are we going to continue to let corporations and private parking meters that just have enriched themselves in the few years that have operated, and this is a concession of 90 years. That is the thing that, again, the dailies and the Rams of the world have created for us. I have committed myself over the last 10 years to battle these dynasties, these insider politicians that have cost us dearly in our parking meters, in our schools, in our housing. And I think that we are on opposite ends when it talks to progressive values and progressive politics.
Yeah. I think the question was how people with these taxes. And one of the things is, yes, absolutely, we have to lower the cost of these tickets. We have to reestablish how the process is done. You know, paying $60 for one ticket is a lot of money. It's a lot of money for working class families here. And I'm going to go back to Lourdes and say we really need to ban the boot.
Okay. In the past, the interests of the 25th Ward residents have not been served in the appropriate manner. For too long, this ward has been run by outside politicians and City Hall. For example, the previous alderman had a 100% track record of voting in line with the mayor's issues, the mayor's agenda. The 25th Ward needs a true champion and one who will stand up for all of the residents, even when that means disagreeing with the mayor. Explain exactly how you would be that champion, what you can do. Byron, we'll start with you.
Independence. Independence from private interest groups, from corporations, from developers. That's the way that we're going to represent the interest of the 25th Ward residents. There's a fundamental step to make sure that we don't repeat the problems of the past. If we learn anything from the past, is the rubber stamp politicians came with a price tag. There's a reason why they voted 100% with the mayor, because they were paid to do so. In order for us to remain independent, we need to make sure that we don't follow those footsteps. We got to make sure that we are beholden to the residents of the 25th Ward. That's what, I don't take money from special interest groups, corporations, or anyone that can taint that process. I will say one more thing. That's why I have not made an endorsement for the mayoral race, because it's important that we leverage our vote with independence, not because we know who's going to win or who is more popular, because we know that we need to make sure that these mayors are accountable to the residents, and that you know that your vote is going to leverage services, is going to leverage affordable housing, is going to leverage for more programs in our schools. That's how we're going to leverage our power as a community. That's why we got to work with every single organization in the 25th Ward to make sure that the residents hold politicians accountable. Because we have the numbers. Corporations have little votes. Developers have little votes. We, the residents of the 25th Ward, can and will write a new chapter. A chapter of less insider politicians. A chapter where we condemn people who continue to make these decisions. The reason why Alderman Solis made the mistakes that he made is because he could not say no. Not to the developers, not to the corporations. We need to put our people first. People over profits. That's how we're going to get things done in City Council.
Same question, 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I love this question. I think it's a great question because with corruption that's plagued our city, we need good governance and ethics reforms. That's why I'm proud to stand with Lori Lightfoot because of her track record on good governance and accountability. Once elected to City Council, I want to have a full plan when it comes to term limits. I think it should be 2 term limits for mayoral, 2 term limits for alderman. Also, I want to go even further that an alderman's position should be a full-time, no second jobs, because for the past several months, we work hard day to day listening to residents, providing services, and I can only imagine trying to have 2 jobs. An alderman should only have 1 job. Also, campaign finance reform. We've been talking about a full ban on contributions from any developer that receives TIF dollars. You should not be able to give to any mayor or any alderman if you receive any TIF money. Let's lower the donor contribution caps to encourage grassroots campaigns. And an anti-pay-to-play. I want to implement a 48-month freeze on local development approvals in any ward where donors have also donated.
Okay. 1 second. So a reminder once again, green go, red stop, and we're going to try to kind of keep it even and softer so that these guys can get their messages across. You get a 1-minute rebuttal.
Again, the issue with all these patches that we're proposing, it is unnecessary to propose all these patches when we have to make a one and one only clear decision. You cannot take money from developers and special interest groups. You just simply can't. And we got to make sure that when we talk about community-driven zoning process, when we talk about many of the things that we want to implement to get more affordable housing, to make sure that we fully fund our schools, there's one thing only that steps in the way. It's corruption. The same corruption of the same politicians that have governed for years. And in order for us to be at the table, we need to make one single decision, Mr. Acevedo. Do not take money from developers. Do not continue to take money from charter schools. That's what hurts the community.
Yeah, speaking of corruption and investigation, I have a pledge here from Mr. Sigcho. This pledge is for indicating that this is not pledged to me, this is the pledge to the people. Indicating that if there's any illegal activity or any fraud that was caught during this past campaign or during early voting, that you'll pledge to disqualify yourself from this race.
Okay, let's keep it down. Let's give him a minute to answer that.
And again, I think the ethics pledge has to be, it cannot be a double standard. I think that any suggestions, and unfortunately, like Mr. Acevedo has made these of facts as insinuations. But we got to make sure that the ethics pledge is both ways, Mr. Acevedo. You have publicly said that you are not going to take money from developers. So, and yet you continue to make those same mistakes. From 16 of the same developers that have funded Alderman Solis, some of them have been still under investigation. Mr. Acevedo, this pledge?
Ladies and gentlemen, we please ask the followers of both candidates follow the rules of this debate. Thank you.
This pledge?
Okay. Your microphone got cut because of time restraints. I do want to take a moment to kind of expand a little bit on this. You know, part of government and being a alderman is that sometimes you have to work with the mayor, and sometimes it might mean agreeing with the mayor or having that independence to do your own thing. So specifically, how do you handle that? How do you play nice, right? And how do you balance both sides?
Absolutely. As a community organizer for about 10 years, we've seen the problem with the lack of accountability. We've seen this in the 25th ward. When we write a blank check to an alderman or a mayor or whoever the public official is, we've seen the consequences of that, of corruption. In order for us to make sure that we leverage our power as a community, we got to make sure that the people in the 25th ward are voting on matters. Going back to the question about the issues with organizations that are not being fully refunded, we cannot vote on bills that are hurting our organizations, that are hurting our small businesses. I will make sure that we meet with every single small business, every single organization, every single resident before we take a vote in City Council. When we don't take those kind of decisions, that is real independence. That's why we had to plan to work with the mayor. We will collaborate whenever we can. But we will not collaborate when the mayor is not committed, for instance, to bring a change to the Chicago Police Department. We need to make sure that we have accountability in every institution. And we cannot vote yes 100% of the time when there's things that we need to address. And this is not to make sure, we need to restore the trust between our institutions and the community. And the first step to do that is to make sure that the community feels well represented, that the community feels that we're listening to them, and their vote reflects their principles and values and their self-interest. And that's my commitment, to make sure that we have an advocate in City Council, an advocate for the working people, not from developers and corporations.
Moving on to Mr. Acevedo, you
Yeah.
get 1 minute rebuttal.
Yeah.
How do you balance working with the mayor and doing what's independent and strong and good for the 25th ward?
Absolutely. You know, take a look at that board up there. That's almost 20 organizations that are doing the work for this ward. And when it comes to development, when it comes to healthcare policies, when it comes to education, we have a lot of nonprofits that are doing the work. So when it comes to development, I want to have a process from the initial approval to the end stage, work with Pluck and the inclusion with residents to make sure that the people are heard. When it comes to healthcare policies, I want to work with Alivio and El Valor to provide better healthcare reforms for our city. And then also as well with education, we're the only campaign that's talking about working with Pilsen Task Force Education and building a coalition with our principals to identify the root causes and create interventions for our schools.
Okay, thank you to the both of you. We're going to move on to the last of our 7 questions, and here it is. How will you work to ensure that we maintain the protection of our sanctuary city status? Alex, I believe the question goes to you first.
Yeah, I think we have to do, you know, when we think of sanctuary city, what does it actually mean? What are the actions on it? To us, it's just a title. The other day, I was walking with my wife and my daughter, and we seen near 24th and Western, Homeland Security hanging out. Now, imagine for our families, our neighbors that are picking up their kids from Instituto Ruiz, and they see that. That's predatory. That creates fear in our community. We have to educate our law enforcement on what a sanctuary city actually is and hold them accountable. There's a lot of nonprofits here like Alivio, El Valor, Pilsen Neighbors that are creating safe havens. You know, Sin Fronteras as well too. Many people I know that are doing the work protecting our undocumented community. As your alderman, we can look for funding. Let's look for funding to fund these organizations that are already doing the work. I think that's something that a responsible alderman can do.
Same question, you get 2 minutes.
Y me gustaría responder la primera parte en español.
Can we keep it in English? Let's do it in English first, and then if you want to do something in Spanish, you can.
It's not being translated?
The English is being translated, that's correct. Let's do this. Let's do the 2 minutes in English, and then we'll do the 2 minutes in Spanish.
Yeah,
It's just to be fair.
Seems like there's no translation. That's right. So I came to the U.S. as a teenager when I was 17 years old. And the issue of immigration, it is a personal issue. And I think that it starts with respect for the dignity of every human being. We need to make sure that we all treat it equally. This country was founded on the foundation of have a fair society that is respectful to the immigrants. Our immigrant community there was a study, about 36% of small businesses generated by the immigrant community. We're the backbone of the economy. And this is a society that was built on fairness, on hardworking people can have an opportunity. We need to make sure that we continue to advocate at every level of government to close the loopholes. We need sanctuary schools. We need to sanctuary schools so our children feel safe in our schools. We need to make sure that we have sanctuary cities so that we don't have again, like the case that happened recently on 18th and Ashland, where someone got detained and deported. We cannot allow this to happen in a city with a huge and beautiful history of blue-collar workers, of immigrant people who have created what we see today. So we have to honor our ancestors. As an immigrant, I will make that a priority, to make sure that we work with the mayor, that we work with the institutions to make sure that our immigrant community is treated with dignity, that we all are equal, that there's not exploitation. There's so many undocumented residents who right now are being exploited, that don't pay fair wages. We need to a lot to do with the labor standards to make sure that we all equal under the law.
Okay. I know that you wanted to translate that into Spanish. I believe the streaming is working, but if it's not, do you guys know? No? Okay. It is working? Okay, I'm going to go with it is working, so then we'll just leave it with English. And if it's any different, then somebody will come up and tell me, and then we'll go from there. Yes? Okay. I know that there was talk about creating a sanctuary advocate's office to monitor complaints and act on them. Do you support that?
Absolutely. I think we also need to do a better job working with our small businesses. We have this federal program called E-Verify and how it's hurting our communities. I think I want to encourage our small business owners not to use E-Verify so that people can go to work safely and not have this sense of fear. Let's work with Casa Michoacan and get more of our residents become citizens, right? There's a lot of workshops out there, and I think that's where we can use our schools as a community center to provide wraparound services so that we can provide more workshops when it comes to immigration. So I absolutely do support it.
There are many great organizations in the community who have made many communities, not only in Pilsen, obviously there's the Chinatown community. There's a lot of communities that have great organizations that are today, Alivium being one of them, another one, that support not only the right to be here, but critical services that otherwise will not be possible. We need to make sure that we continue to support in these efforts, to make sure that organizations are not only finding advocates, they're not only fighting alone, but we make sure that we look for resources, that we look for the resources that will make them fully functional. Because our immigrant community not only need to be a place to work, a place to live, but also need healthcare. They also need good schools. And there are many great organizations across the 25th Ward that have made that their mission. We will continue to cooperate, to collaborate, and to be big advocates so that you're not only supported but fully funded. It hurts me sometimes to see the infrastructure crumbling, the people running deficits because there's not enough resources. But there's always resources when there's luxury development. There's always resources when a corporation asks for a subsidy. So we gotta make sure that we fully funded those critical fundamental resources that are gonna help not only the immigrant community, but everybody in the 25th Ward to have a more equitable society, a more equitable 25th Ward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the both of you. I know that we're starting to wrap it up, at least this portion of the question and answer part of this debate or forum tonight. But as we collect some of those index cards, and hopefully all of you got a chance to put down your questions for the night, so you can see the ushers are going around collecting them. They're going to go through them really quickly and then bring them over to me. But in the meantime, let's do this. I want each of you to tell me, if you were to win, what are your top 3 priorities? And you can only pick 3. So 3 things that you immediately, as you take office, are going to work on. Mr. Acevedo, I will begin with you. Let's do 2 minutes, yes? So 3 things and specific things.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the first ones would be environment and healthcare.
And what does that
The
mean?
National Resource Defense Council did a study in the city of Chicago, and Pilsen, Chinatown, South Loop was one of the most toxic communities, right? So when it comes to the air we breathe in, the quality of water that we drink, it's causing birth defects, it's causing epilepsy, it's causing lupus, it's causing cancer. This is affecting people from my family, members of our neighborhood, and I want to help bring solutions, healthcare policies, working with Alivio Elvalord to make sure that we champion so that the air quality doesn't affect our health. I want to revitalize areas like Cermak Corridor. Let's talk about bringing green jobs and cleaning
So
up
that's
that
number
space.
2, priority number 2.
Good governance. We talked about this earlier. Good governance at a time that our city needs it most. Term limits on mayor and aldermen, banning any developer or corporations that gets TIPS dollars, and putting a 48-month freeze on any developer that wants to propose anything in our ward. And the third one is education. We have a lot of schools that need the resources. Our principals, our teachers need the resources. So I want to work with the Pilsen Task Force Education Committee that's already doing the work to provide them the resources that they need to make our schools more attractive. Because remember, with the Pilsen Quality of Life, we've seen that 1,500 families send their kids to schools outside the ward. We need to find those 1,500 families and make sure that they're sending their kids to neighborhood schools, because that's how we help build a stronger education for all our families here.
Okay. So again, your 3, environment and healthcare, good governance, and education. We move on to you, Sigcho Lopez, your 3 top priorities as if you were to win this election. What would they be as you move into office?
The 3 key components have to be with sustainable development. We, in the 25th Ward, do not have an issue of bringing resources. The resources are coming in, there's a lot of projects, there's a lot of development, but it's not benefiting the residents. In fact, has been displayed thousands of people, many small businesses that have seen their doors closed. So we make sure that development is also helping the residents in the 25th Ward, the small businesses. We will make that a priority to make sure that we sign community benefits agreements that not only create affordable housing, that not only create local employment, but also that are respectful with the environment. We will make sure that Hillco, the new project in Hillco in the industrial corridor, have the highest standards of the environment, that create more jobs for our community, that make sure that we continue to grow. Same thing in the West Loop, to make sure and across the 25th Ward that neighborhood opportunity funds are equitable, accessible to every small business. So the main thing is sustainable development, to make sure that every project is vetted by the residents. The second has to do with education. As an educator who has been teaching for about 10 years in public schools, I have created a bilingual program to support parents, to support people who need their GEDs, ESL, computers, financial literacy. We need to support these projects. Being a local school council member in at least 2 schools in our communities, we need to fully fund our schools. We need to bring more resources. And we need to make sure that for that to happen, have an elected representative school board that don't have bankers but parents. The next one and the final one has to do with transparency. I have made 10 years of progressive fighting for our residents and fighting corruption. We will make sure that the aldermen are the first people who are accountable, and we empower the Inspector General to hold our aldermen and city council accountable for any wrongdoing. And that's what I'm proud to have the support of people like David Orr and Dick Simpson. We're gonna fight corruption, that's a priority.
We're going to flip things around a little bit. We're going to have the 2 students from Benito Juarez come on up to ask their questions, and let me introduce them. Eileen Cervantes and Irving Ibarra. Again, they are students here at Benito Juarez. So come on up, and Eileen, we'll have you go first.
Hello, my name is Eileen Cervantes, and I am a senior at Benito Juarez Community Academy. I helped organize the Student Voice Committee, and this will be my 2nd time voting. My question is a 2-part question. What do you see as the role of an alderman when it comes to Chicago public schools? And how would you help make your ward a place where families with school-aged children want and can afford to live in?
What a great question, and thank you so much for being civically engaged. It's great to see young people like yourself engaged and asking these tough questions. One of the key aspects that we have to see is that because of unbalanced development and unsustainable development, we're seeing many families living in our community. That's a reality across the 25th ward. We make sure that we don't see schools as an expense. CPS and the mayor, the last mayor, and the last alderman had made schools an expense. They had decided that they can close down schools, that they don't have to invest in. We need to make sure that we see schools as an investment. That's what keeps our families in our community. We need to fully fund it, bring programs, empower youth like yourself. And for that, we need to connect with housing. Because if our families cannot afford to connect to stay in our communities, we need to make sure that they're supported. That's what I'm making a commitment to make sure that we find every possible resources by holding developers accountable, by making sure that they pay their fair share, they pay their taxes to make sure that we have enough resources for schools, to make sure that we help our families that today not only see the city as an obstacle, but the city has contributed to the displacement, but not helping them to be up to code sometimes by harassing families with violations, by sending city inspectors, and not having enough resources to help to keep up on their buildings or for capital improvement, things that we need. And the money is there. We have TIF dollars, we have money to make it happen. We will make a commitment, and we will make a pledge for that. Those are the real pledges that we need to make sure that we take, is to make sure that our families remain, that every school is fully funded, and every child, no matter the zip code, has the same quality education, so that we have young people like you thriving and be the future leaders of the 25th ward.
Stay with me real quick. Do you have a follow-up question for him? From what he said, you're happy with his answer? Okay. So then I want you to ask the same question to Mr. Acevedo.
What do you see as the role of an alderman when it comes to Chicago public schools? And how would you help make your ward a place where families with school-age children want and can afford to live in?
Absolutely. I think it's an important question because we've seen the amount of students leave our community because the affordability. I think it dropped nearly almost 50%. So we have to do a lot more to protect our schools. We need to continue supporting our neighborhood schools, and that is done by continuing to support the neighborhood work that's already been done by the Pilsen Education Task Force. You know, they've been doing so much work in the past decade to make our schools more attractive. Like Youngman School, we see Miss Lucy here, and the principal from Youngman. STEM education. It's one of the first STEM educations that they brought here to the Pilsen community. Now parents feel proud that they're sending their kid to Youngman because it has a STEM education. As an alderman, I want to continue to work with these organizations that are already doing the work. But we also have to make sure that we're identifying why other families are sending their kids to schools outside the ward. So we have to make sure that our teachers are given the resources that they need, right? Let's build pipelines. Let's talk about building a pipeline of being bilingual teachers, who are special education teachers, because we've seen a lot of vacancies in our schools, and they're not being filled. So we have to do a lot more to work with UIC, work with our nonprofits who can help fill these vacancies to better serve our kids. And that's where your alderman's office can come in. But also, most importantly, you know, my platform, number one, is in electing a local school board. Absolutely, one that's going to be comprised of teachers, of principals, of parents, and students just like you who can bring these issues to the table and help provide better education policies for our community.
Thank you, Eileen. Irving, you're up next.
Hi. My name is Irvin Ibarra. I am a senior here at Benito Juarez, and I am also the producer of a documentary called Pilsen and Gray, The Situation and Controversy of Gentrification. Here's my question to both aldermanic candidates. To answer, I'll go with Byron first. So there are some team outreach programs here in Pilsen and in the 25th Ward to deter gang activity in our community. So what is your plan to help fund these teen organizations to help prevent and deter teens from entering gangs?
That's a great question. Our city currently invests an incredible amount of money for punitive measures to incarcerate young people that oftentimes come back without opportunities, and on top of that with a record. Almost 38% of our budget is dedicated for policing, for safety, but nearly not enough to create actual opportunities for our young people, to make sure that our people are not, or young people in particular, are not incarcerated in the first place, to make sure that our high schools or schools are fully funded with young people like yourself engaging in youth programs. That's what I was a soccer coach at Pilsen Academy. I had a wonderful time talking to young people, coaching them soccer, but also teaching them poetry. And those are the kind of programs we need fully funded. We need to make sure that we fund those kind of programs, that we make sure that the city makes that a priority. Yes, of course we need public safety, but public safety is not only policing, it's preventing violence in the first place. And that's why we need a holistic approach to invest in education. That's what we need to make sure that our budget prioritizes these initiatives. As an educator that has served in multiple local school councils, that has created bilingual programs, that has walked the walk with the youth, I know that we make sure that our young people are a priority for us, that we create employment for young people. That's why we talk about community benefits agreements. When developers and big corporations come to our community, we need to create opportunities for young people. So we generate employment, local hiring, opportunities that continue to help students like you to go to college, to go to school, to get a good salary. So those are the initiatives that we need to make a priority, and we will make sure that we find the resources that the city currently deviates for other purposes, including for development that should be balanced, not for the many, not for the few, but for the many. Thank you.
Now the question from Mr. Acevedo. Do you need me to repeat it, or
No,
you're
you're
good?
Okay. Byron mentioned about the resources, but the resources are here. Let's talk about Resurrection Project when they started the basketball league. Increase the Peace. Shout out to all those who are with Increase the Peace. Those are programs that are keeping our kids off the streets. I remember back in the day growing up, and we couldn't walk down 18th Street to buy my basketball cards at Herb's Bike Shop. It was tough. Gangs played every corner. But there were programs that were implemented because of the community organizations that have done the work. The resources are there, but as an alderman, we can provide more funding to protect them. And more importantly is as a nurse, and yes, as a nurse, I want to work with Instituto Progreso, Healthy Hoods, who have healthcare options so that we get more of our students. Because one of the major issues when we think of violence, it's poverty, it's lack of opportunity, and it's mental illness. So we have to make sure that we're focusing on the root causes. Let's give our kids opportunity by providing them jobs during the summer. Last year, I worked with 15 small businesses down 18th Street to provide jobs. Not only did it put money in their pocket, but to build relationships and job training skills. These are programs I want to continue to work with, that organizations that are already doing the work. And mental illness, yes, as a nurse at Pilsen Mental Health, I worked in drop-in centers. So instead of police officers taking people who were symptomatic of mental illness, instead of taking them to lockup or 26th Street, they brought them to me, the nurse who provided care for them, and other therapists for them. These are programs that I want to continue to keep in our community. So thank you for the question.
I have one more question for Byron. So I know recently I found out that you said that one thing you're planning to do is to cut down on the number of police officers in the 25th Ward. And my fear is for gangs to come back. So is that really a solution to have for the 25th Ward?
I'm not sure where you got that quote. I think we gotta be factual. I think it's important to be factual. Obviously, public safety is a concern. Obviously, it's a concern. It's something when we need to make sure that we address. Nobody has said anything in my campaign unequivocally about cutting on police. What we have said is that we need to make sure that our budget reflects a holistic approach. We have talked about having, and that's the difference in both campaigns, that we have to talk about accountability and oversight. It is important to restore the trust between the Chicago Police Department and our young people and our community. And that is a difference. This is not talking about cutting any, we right now need to make sure that we look at what we have and make sure that we are investing our resources effectively. That's why we need more oversight within the Chicago Police Department, so we don't invest more and more in settlements that continue to hurt our young people. We need to make sure that we have accountability so our community feels that we have, as institutions, the Chicago Police Department and every institution in the city has their back, that is addressing crime, that is addressing the needs of the community. That's going to generate more trust. That is going to help not only the Chicago Police Department, but especially our communities, the young people that you just referred. It is critical that we think about public safety as a holistic approach, not only as a punitive approach. That's what's happening for way too long. And we continue on that path. We're gonna make sure that we have failed our young people. We right now need to be focused not only on safety, but making sure that we address the root causes of violence. The root causes of violence, which is poverty, inequality, and lack of access to higher opportunities or employment. And we will make sure that we diligently work with the organizations and the businesses and everybody in the city of Chicago to make sure that every child, every young person has a good opportunity, and we have not only a safe, but a thriving community.
Okay, this is when I want you to be really loud because these students did a fantastic job. I'm going to take an educated guess and tell you that Eileen Cervantes and Irving Ibarra are names that you will hear again someday, so keep them in mind. I was able to get the questions that you submitted. They have been vetted. They didn't pick yours up? Okay, these are the ones I have, so I'm going to go with that, but they will get them from you, and we'll see if we can fit them in, okay? So they've been vetted, they were picked at random. Let's go with these, we get 3. Let's start with the 25th Ward is much more than just Pilsen. How will you represent all the people and neighborhoods in that ward? Mr. Acevedo, you can go first.
Yes. Yes, test.
Give him 1 second. He's coming to you. And you're home.
Tess, we're good.
There you go.
Yeah, I love this question because our campaign's already doing it. When you think of the 25th Ward, it compromises 4 major languages, from English, Spanish to Mandarin and Cantonese. From McKinley Park to West Loop to South Loop to Chinatown to Pilsen to Abba Homes to Taylor Street. Each of these communities represent different pressing issues. So I want to make the Alderman's office more accountable. Let's modernize it. Let's make it mobile. What I want to be able to do is have public service coordinators at each and one of these communities where we're having operating offices so our seniors in West and South Loop and Chinatown can walk down the block and get their questions answered from your Alderman's office. Most of the time, people don't know who their Alderman is, what they do, or let alone navigate where their office is. From my experience in creating mobile pop-up clinics, we brought services to the doorsteps, to our seniors, to small businesses, to churches, and I want to use that same concept and bring it to the Alderman's office.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Acevedo. Same question to Sigcho Lopez.
And can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. The 25th Ward is much more than just Pilsen. How will you represent all the people in all the neighborhoods in the ward?
We have been working on this campaign not only now during election time, but we have been working with this for 10 years to bring people together. The same challenges that our community are facing are the same challenges that communities across the 25th Ward are facing. There are some needs that are different, but fundamentally we have a lot of the similar problems. Small businesses that need support. Small businesses do not have access to neighborhood opportunity funds or support. I recently met a small business and showed me a stack of letters from the city and bills that they had to pay and not enough revenue. So we gotta make sure that we oppose regressive taxes that are hurting businesses across the board. In Chinatown, I was the only candidate that stopped, and also in Pilsen, we stopped a tax, regressive tax, but also supported the Chinatown community to stop a special service tax that had 80% of small businesses opposing it. We cannot continue to pass those taxes. We need to make sure that we also continue to talk about how we can support them, not how we extort them. We have seen what Alderman Burke has done. Alderman Burke has been extorting businesses. That's how shameful have done. I mean, this is
Use your
the
cards,
practices-
not your voice right now. Use your cards.
These are the practices that we need to stop. We need to support the businesses in the West Loop, in Chinatown. I see the concern, and I see that Alderman Borg has been an ally of my opponent. There's no reason for us to be disrespectful. I think that we need to make sure that we continue to talk about equality, that we continue to talk about small businesses, how we can support our people in Chinatown is by helping the small businesses community or residents, not the developers, not the corporations that have great lawyers and advocates that are advocated for them. And yes, the same insider politicians that continue to bash me because...
And your time's up. Next question. Mr. Acevedo goes to you first. How will you reduce the trash on our sidewalks and in our parks? 2
Yes.
minutes.
Great question. And that's one of the questions you hear every day knocking on the door, whether if it's dog poop or if it's somebody stealing their garbage cans. You know, the city implemented a grid system a couple years back, and the idea was to save the taxpayers $26 million. But it hasn't saved a single penny. It's only created much more frustration. Now residents can't find a garbage can. Nowadays, if you want to get a garbage can, you can't go to your alderman's office or your ward superintendent. You have to go online and fill out an application. These are where our tax dollars go. So I want to make sure that we bring that program back to the alderman's office so that your alderman can be held accountable, right, when it comes to garbage cans and recycling. Also, I want to go even further. I know we have a 311 system where you can track your service requests, but I want to have a ward, 25th Ward, our own app, so that you can hold our office accountable, and then we can follow up with your requests. Our office, and my pledge is our office within 48 hours, when you have a service request, our office will follow up with you.
Same question, 2 minutes. How will you reduce the trash on our sidewalks and our parks?
The city has plenty of resources that unfortunately are not equally distributed. We're seeing communities that have great services and others that don't. And there's no reason why we should not have equality in our communities. Every block, every neighborhood should be treated with the same level of respect and same level of advocacy than any other community. Unfortunately, we have had an alderman that has been absent, not now. The alderman has been absent for a long time. And again.
Use your cards, not your voice right now, red or green.
Again, I understand the discomfort that brings to many people in the audience, because yes, my opponent did endorse Alderman Solis when I ran in 2015. I understand your discomfort. But again, we have to learn from the past to move forward. We have to know that in order for us to have real advocacy, we have to be fair with every community. Every resident in the 25th Ward, we need to make sure that we continue to go to every block. I have made a pledge to go to every community every week to make sure that we receive complaints directly from the residents. We need a full-time alderman, an alderman that is committed to work for the 25th Ward residents, because the practices of the past have been of having an alderman that is too worried about collecting campaign contributions than actually serving the residents of the 25th Ward. And that's a fact. That's what I ran against him 4 years ago. That's why we need to have a new chapter, a chapter of an alderman that is working for you, not for the special interest groups. As I said, we need someone who is going to work in every block, every neighborhood, have office hours everywhere, and is willing to, yes, do the work that is not so fancy. Pick up trash, go to schools, go to the alleys, and we know that.
Thank you very much. And the last question from the audience. Mr. Acevedo, you begin. What are your ultimate clear goals to accomplish a way to leave Ward 25 better than when you found it? What are your ultimate clear goals to accomplish this?
Yes, absolutely. One of the first goals, because it's very personal to me, is cleaning up the Cermak corridor. You drive down there now, there's potholes that you can probably swim in now. Kids that are walking to Benito Juarez and Walsh School, they're looking at a school one way, and the other way they're looking at an industrial hazardous corridor. It's been sitting there for decades. Yes, we shut down the coal plant, but what are we doing to clean it up? I've been knocking on doors and for this past several months, and we see public notices of lead contamination. And we look at those buildings, those are multi-unit buildings. Many of these families can't afford for water filters to clean up the lead and contaminated pesticides that we have in this water that are hurting our health. As a nurse, I want to advocate so that we revitalize Cermak Industrial Corridor, so we can make an incubator for entrepreneurs, for trade schools, and artists here. You know, that's one of the most important things. Our artists are not getting enough credit. Let's revitalize that area to make it more, to build a better economy too by using the river. Why, you know, Chinatown has a great river port. Let's build one here in Pilsen so that we can take water taxis downtown as well. I want to create opportunity for our community that we're not doing today, that we should be doing today. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question. What are your ultimate clear goals to leave the 25th Ward better than when you found it? 2 minutes.
We need to make sure that we learn from what has done the previous alderman. Yes, and I know that it's uncomfortable, but we need to make sure that we don't replicate the past. For order for us to move forward, we need to make sure that we make housing as a fundamental stepstone for our families a priority that needs to be consistent with the values. We cannot accept money from developers but yet pretend that we're advocating for the residents. It doesn't work like that. We will make sure that we govern with transparency, with open meetings. There will not be more closed-door meetings in this community. We're going to bring everybody to the table. We will not put special interest groups before the interests of the residents. We will make sure that when we talk about community-driven zoning, we're talking about community benefits agreement, 30% affordable housing set aside, local hiring, small businesses being advocated so they have a space in the community that they also help created. That we fully fund our schools, and it starts by making sure that we have an elected representative school board. That we put a moratorium on the expansion of our charter schools. That we make sure that we bring accountability to every level of government. That we hold our aldermen to the highest standards. The IG will be the first one to investigate us. The first one to know that is any wrongdoing. We need to make sure that we lead by example. We will lead by example. We will make sure that we have a new chapter by working together with open meetings. No more closed-door meetings. That's the way we move forward.
We are doing really, really well on time. So as we begin to wrap it up, each of you take a drink of water, kind of clear your heads for a second, and we'll do 2 minutes of closing arguments. Mr. Sigcho Lopez, we'll begin with you. You have 2 minutes to give your closing arguments before we wrap it up for the night.
I'm very humbled to have received the highest number of votes in the 25th Ward on February 26th. And we have done that, and I'm thankful to every single resident who has supported us and has supported the campaign, because our message has resonated across the 25th Ward and across the city, because we need independence, we need progressive values, we need to advocate for families, because corruption, and I hate to repeat it all the time, but it's very personal to me. When I came as a teenager, my mom had to make the tough decision to let me go from my home for a better future. And that's what we need to have respect for. These same smear tactics are part of the past. Let's move forward. And for that, we need to know that when we have come together, and I'm a testament, the reason why I'm here in front of you tonight is a testament or what ordinary people have done for me when I didn't have shelter over my head. It's a testament of what public institutions have done for immigrants like me, to have safety nets that create opportunities for a better future. That's what is so personal for me. That's why I have advocated for the children in the 25th Ward so they have good quality public schools, so they also have a better future. That's what also I advocate for the residents, for the tenants, and the homeowners alike, so they also have a better future for the families. That's why I am here in front of you tonight to let you know and guarantee you that transparency and accountability are no buzzwords. That is the first step to move forward. That is on April 2nd. We have a great opportunity to move forward as a community on a new chapter. A chapter that brings hope, not as mere tactics. A chapter that brings us, all of us together for a better future.
Alex Acevedo, you have 2 minutes for closing arguments.
I was born and raised in this community. I have never left. I'm running on a campaign because I have a fire in my belly that's been burning for a while, not on an anti-alderman campaign. People came here to listen to issues. I grew up in this community. I went to our schools, played at our parks, shopped at our stores because I love it. And I never left, even when it was the worst time in our family where people left because there was gangs on every corner. But we stood here. We made something of our lives. And I want to provide the same opportunities for my daughter. These are things that we have to rebuild. Rebuild the working class family that represents the 25th Ward. Let's bring good governance and ethics reforms to City Council. Term limits. Absolutely, we need term limits. We need to ban any developer that gives any TIF dollars from giving any money to alderman or mayor. Let's make sure we revitalize Cermak Corridor by building healthier environments so we have more green space, not only here in Pilsen, but let's look at West Loop, South Loop, where people are moving to these areas, but we see less opportunities for green space. Let's protect the mom and pop shops, the corner stores where we used to buy our quarter chips, that used to employ local businesses. These are things people want to see because those help build communities. That helps create culture. These are things that we're seeing that people are not helping today. As an alderman, I want to make sure that the resources are there to protect them. And not only as a lifetime resident, but as a nurse for the past 10 years, yes, for the past 10 years, I've been working to make sure that we provide more healthcare policies to protect our families. Work with organizations like El Valor and Alivio. Yes, they provide resources for our families, but when it comes to funding, they see a scarce amount because of what's happening to our state and our city. And as the very first nurse to run for city council and be the first one elected, my pledge is to work with all the organizations in this community that are ready to do the work so they can service our community. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, these are your two candidates for the April 2nd runoff. Go out and vote. You've got Byron. Hold on. We're not done yet. Hold on. So your two candidates, Byron Sigcho Lopez and Alex Acevedo. Let's give them a big round of applause for being a part of this tonight. And with that, I leave you with Esther Corpus. I'm Lourdes Duarte with WGN News. Thank you so much for putting up with me tonight as well. Bye-bye.
Good evening again. I'm Esther Corpus, CEO of Alivio Medical Center, and I'm here with Alivio's founder, my mentor, Carmen Velasquez, who founded Alivio 30 years ago in January. At this time, and I hope people don't leave because we have some surveys that we ask all of you to complete, but I want to also introduce you to the over 20 organizations who put a lot of time and effort in putting this forum together. We hope that you found it useful. Let me, at this time, ask those organizations to come forward. You can't imagine the amount of time and effort that all these volunteers and leaders put into this evening's forum. Alivio Medical Center, Centro Sin Fronteras, the Economic Strategies Development Corporation, El Valor Corporation, Healthy Hood Chicago, Pilsen Neighbors Community Council, Unite 25, Association por los Derechos, Chicago Dia de los Niños, ESDC Chamber of Commerce, Frida Kahlo Community Organization, Instituto del Progreso Latino, Pilsen Wellness Center, United Neighborhood Organization, Casa Michoacán, Chicago Commons, El Hogar de Niño, Gads Hill Center, Mujeres Latinas en Acción, and the Resurrection Project. So again, these are all of the organizations that put this evening's forum together. I want to, of course, thank the candidates for spending time with us this evening and really addressing a lot of issues that are important to all of us in this room. I want to, of course, thank Lourdes for doing an incredible job. Watch her at 4 o'clock on WGN and on Adelante Chicago. I've seen her show, Alivio's Banana Show, and it's a wonderful show. Lourdes, gracias. Mr. Ocon, one of the best principals I've had the pleasure of working with. He cares about his students. He's very engaged in the community, and we thank him for letting us use his facilities, his resources, and the wonderful students that participated in this evening's debate. At this time, I would like to ask Carmen Velasquez, founder of Alivio Medical Center, to, Carmen's turning 80 this year. Carmen has more energy than most 20-year-olds. And we picked her because she doesn't take shit from anybody. And so these two gentlemen, whoever is our alderman, one of these two will be. And as you guys have voiced, we are going to hold that individual accountable. Carmen.
Oops. I don't know what I did. Okay. Buenas noches. Y no se me vayan. Okay? My job is to ask candidate Alex Acevedo, do you agree to meet within the first 30 days of taking office, if you should win, with the 20 organizations that are represented here?
Absolutely. Yes.
Candidate Acevedo, will you support the Pilsen Quality of Life Plan? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a yes.
Yes.
Candidate Acevedo, do you agree to meet with the group of organizations on a trimester basis regarding our issues of priority?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Remember, you have all these witnesses. So talk about accountability. He or both of them may be accountable and will be to you. Now, candidate Brian Sigcho Lopez, perdona. Do you agree, candidate Lopez, if you are the candidate that wins, will you meet within the first 30 days of taking office with the 20 organizations?
Yes. So
Loud, we can't hear you.
Yes, I will.
All right. Do you agree to support the Pilsen Quality of Life Plan? Yes or no?
Yes.
Ahora sí. Will you meet with the group of organizations on a trimester basis regarding our issues of priority?
Yes.
All right. You are a witness to the commitment of these two candidates. Your voice will be heard on election day, and they must follow up. Thank you. Esther follows. Esther Corpus.
Before everyone leaves, you should have received a survey, a long piece of paper. It's English and Spanish with a pencil. It'll help us in the future as we plan these debates or another similar event. We need your feedback. So please take the time. We had an individual who took a lot of time to come up with the survey, so we do ask if you could please fill it out and return it to the ushers who will be in the aisle. We also want to bring your attention to a rally that's going to happen on March 27th. It's our Go TV rally, March 27th at 4:30 p.m. at Ping Tong Memorial Park at 1700 South Wentworth in Chinatown. After the rally, the group will be marching over to the Chinatown Library for early voting for those individuals who would like to early vote. I want to thank everyone again for coming out and participating in this evening's debate. Thank you.